I would love to introduce you to Mr. Ibukun Adebayo, who's the Group Director of Sustainable Finance and Investment Strategy at the London Stock Exchange Group. And he will deliver today's keynote speech, The Role of the Diaspora in Advancing Reparative Justice. First, a little bit about Ibukun. He is responsible for the London Stock Exchange Group's growth and collaboration strategy in emerging markets, with a key focus on India and Africa. He has driven key initiatives such as the LSEG's Companies to Aspire Africa publication, and also launched the exchange's first international advisory group for Africa, bringing together key business leaders, investors, and African regulators to solve the challenges facing African capital markets. Prior to this, Ibukun was head of LSEG's equity listings business, covering key markets in South Asia, Middle East, and Africa. Managing relationships with companies, international advisors, and regulators. In this capacity, Ibukun was involved in over 200 IPOs in London by issuers from these regions. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Ibukun to the podium.
Thank you. Indeed. Thank you. Very good. Do I have the presentation? Yes. Sorry, just final fixes. How's everyone doing? Yeah, excellent, fantastic, very good. Are we there? Shall I just kick off and then I can move on to this one? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. It's a great privilege to be here, and I just want to acknowledge all of the great work that David is doing and putting on this amazing conference over the last 2 days. I think we should just give him a round of applause and his team for all of the work they're doing. It's been absolutely fantastic. So I just want to make a slight correction to the introduction that was given. So I am formally of the London Stock Exchange Group. I actually left last year to start and run a business called Restitution Capital. Restitution Capital is all about getting our money back. Stolen patrimony, returning it to where it belongs, to the people and the community of the Global South. So before we get to that, I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview of how we got there. And I have to admit, I probably am not the person that I used to be, okay? So in the old days, life was very comfortable. I was working at banks, working at London Stock Exchange. I didn't really follow the matters of my black brothers and sisters in the way that I should have done. You know, I would claim that I went to the Al Sharpton march in Brixton in '91, which I did, but I was dragged along by my sister. I also went to a prison cell to remove my sister after being arrested for throwing tacks on the floor at Crystal Palace running track when Zola Budd, the barefoot athlete, was running around the track. So I have to admit, my emancipation came from a very, very different place. Working in finance, working particularly for African governments looking to raise money in London. And I always found the same challenge, which is that African governments could not raise money cheaply. In the UK, you could raise your money at 3%. In Africa, 15%. Why? So they said, the investors would say to me, well, it's the risk. So I said, okay, we'll mitigate that risk. Let's bring in some general risk around FX. We'll change that. Let's put in some economic risk factors. We'll change that. And then it always boiled down to the fact that the risks for Africa and for the Caribbean was about political instability. And I thought, well, we've just had 5 prime ministers in this country in the same term of government. So what are you talking about, instability? And then it led me to reading some really important work around a Canadian economist who many of you may not have heard of, and his name is Nathan Nunn. He's a Canadian, and he made the link between the legacy of slavery and colonialism and how it exacerbates today mass fraud and corruption that's being undertaken by the large global multinational companies operating in our countries, in the Caribbean and in Africa, systematically exacerbating a grand architecture of corruption whereby we suffer from instability in terms of our economic and political environments based upon this infiltration of these types of companies, handing out brown envelopes, perpetuating that grand corruption. And let's look back in history really briefly. The South Sea Company, the East India Company, they were supported by the church to do that. The same sort of thing. They were the first organizations to perpetuate illicit financial flow, illicit trade flow. Today, it's no different. The multinational companies are now supported by a different type of enabler. It's not the church today, but it's the Western consultancy firm that builds the strategy for exploitation. It's the accounting firm that creates the fanciful accounting to be able to channel wealth and hide it somewhere else. And it's the legal firm that creates that continuously egregious and unconscionable business term that an African or Caribbean government does business on. So this is what continues to fuel corruption. This is what continues to support the payment of bribes. And this is what continues to keep Africa and the Caribbean subjugated in terms of economic progress. I'm just going to see if I can flick on here. So I want to show you this chart very quickly, if it comes up. Okay. This chart here, if you can see it, it might be hard for those of you in the back, but this chart shows you from the start of this century, the amount of money that has been lost through illicit financial flows. That number is estimated to be between 1.9 and 2.3 trillion US dollars. Every single year, $100 billion leaves Africa through a transfer pricing issue, through an extraction of value, through some form of illicit financial flow. Just to put that into context, 100 billion a year is more than overseas development assistance, FII, so foreign direct investment. It's more than the foreign portfolio investment and remittances combined. So if we were able to eradicate these illicit financial flows, Africa and the Caribbean would be a net exporter of credit. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? Let me further put these figures in context. So Sudan, that number you can see on there, I'm trying to look because I can't see it, but that number for Sudan, you can see there, $79 billion. That was Sudan's GDP in 2024. The DRC, the number you can see there for DRC, which is $388 billion, that was DRC's healthcare budget. Sorry, DRC's healthcare budget is $2.5 billion a year. So you can imagine the extent of what's been pulled out of the country versus what the country needs to feed its people, to heal its people. And the figure that's the most egregious there is South Africa, which you can see nearly $1 trillion worth of flows that have been taken out by large multinational companies. This would pay for affordable housing and its budget and the subsidy 10 times over for the next 10 years in South Africa. This is how bad the problem is. So lots of companies and lots of individuals and lots of all sorts of organizations are doing their best in order to try to reverse these flows. But the reality is that these flows take a long, long time to reverse. So Restitution Capital, was born specifically for the purpose of reversing those flows. So what do? We are a team of professionals who have come together from legal, finance, international development, human rights, to work with sovereign governments exclusively to bring the tools of both legal and indeed the finance world to develop claims against those bad actors. So we bring civil action and cases against those companies on behalf of our governments in the international world, in OECD countries. And then when we build those cases, which generally have a very low burden of proof, the money comes back directly to those governments, and most importantly, under a managed repatriation scheme, which ensures that money is placed back into really important things in those countries. Number one, balance sheet repair and debt sustainability, so that we no longer have to rely on the IMF. Into housing, so that we're not waiting for a decision from USAID in Washington on how to build more affordable housing. On green infrastructure, so that we're not waiting for handouts from the loss and damage program at COP. And in education, most importantly, so that we, in our collective countries, can educate our most important resource, which is our young people, under the age of 18 in particular. And then on top of all of this, we're building with these countries true intergenerational wealth funds, which will allow us to receive back this stolen patrimony so that more of us, like myself, who are diaspora, feel that we can go home. So it sounds ambitious what we're doing, and it is, right? But we've made a start. And ultimately, we have had a lot of backing. Our efforts have been recognised by the UK government, so we've received funding from Rule of Law UK. We have a grant from the Swedish government, CEDA, and also the Germans, GIZ. But there's more to do. And there's more to do, particularly working with the groups who are working in the area of reparations, because this is a really important thing that we must get back what belongs to us. And I think I'll finish just by saying, I used to always think that the statement that, God helps those who help themselves was scripture, and then I realized it wasn't, actually. It's nowhere. It's not written anywhere. But I think it might well be from some various Greek philosophers. But the reality is that through restitution and what we're doing right now, we are showing the global north that we are helping ourselves. We're helping ourselves back to receive that stolen patrimony. And we hope also that what restitution is doing is helping those repatriation groups, those reparation groups, to also support all of their efforts. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening.